now with video number 2 of this book here, reviewing this book here, Girls and Autism. So, on page 26, the next chapter discusses Cary Grant's experience of raising her 2 autistic daughters. Now, Cary Grant is a celebrity. She's a broadcaster and celebrity. You may well be familiar with her name. She's that red-haired woman. You know, she's a voice coach. She's got all of her children have various issues. She talks in this chapter about her 2 autistic girls, Talia and Imogen. And her autistic girls are not stereotypical. Talia was very quiet and liked to play alone, although she avoided affection. But the key thing is that she was very quiet. She wasn't like a troublemaker or anything, but she longed for friendship. While Imogen, the younger one, was chatty, highly sociable, but sensitive to noise. You don't often, the stereotype of autism doesn't often include highly sociable. So both of her children, although they're autistic, they're both not stereotypical. Interestingly, she talks about how her youngest daughter, Imogen, talked about herself in a third person when she was growing up. That's like me. I talked about myself in the third person. I have read that this is quite common in autism. I think it's not specific to autism because some non-autistic children do it as well, and I think it is actually meant to be quite a normal phase of development for like very little children to talk about themselves in the third person, but it's usually like a short-lived phase, whereas I think in autistic kids it doesn't always happen, but it is meant to be quite common in autism, and it can go on for a lot longer. And I know that when I was a kid, my mum used to say that she found it strange, but she didn't know why. But certainly when I was like 4 or 5, possibly even older than that, I would still lapse into talking to myself in the third person. Not like all the time, but quite a lot I would refer to myself by my name, like Anna, not I. It was like Anna or she. I called myself she. Apparently it is quite common in autism, but obviously my mum didn't know about autism at the time. So that's interesting. So none of her children looked autistic, whatever looking autistic is meant to be, but they weren't stereotypical. They spoke, they made eye contact, and those sorts of things. And no professional would assess Talia. So in August, they wouldn't assess her because they didn't think that she had any significant enough problems to be assessed. But obviously, her mother was picking up on the issues. So in August 2009, Imogen, who was 3, and Talia, who was 8, were both assessed privately. Talia was diagnosed with Asperger's and dyscalculia. I also have dyscalculia. And Imogen was diagnosed with high-functioning autism. And her mother says how Asperger's has obviously since been taken out as a separate category, but she thinks that it is unhelpful as her 2 girls are totally different. I agree. I do think that there are distinct types, although I think they're probably more nuanced than the old divisions. In my case, I actually, because her mother doesn't really explain, why her younger daughter was diagnosed with high-functioning autism and her other was diagnosed with Asperger's, really, beyond saying that her younger daughter, Imogen, didn't mask as much. My understanding is that high-functioning autism was given as a diagnosis to those who were more obviously, say, autistic in childhood, often with more obvious language differences, whereas Asperger's often weren't so obvious in childhood. I don't think there's too much of a I think that's the main distinction, because I think people with HFA aren't supposed to have a learning intellectual disability, so they've got good intelligence, general intelligence, if you like. I personally kind of feel like I'm a little bit of both, because I have the high verbal ability of someone with Asperger's in terms of my ability to speak, but my ability to kind of like function, I don't think is as high as many people with Asperger's. Like in terms of my ability to like have relationships and to work is a lot more impaired than many people with Asperger's. So I sort of feel like I'm a bit of both, and I don't know how common that is. I was actually diagnosed with high functioning autism. But that was, I think that was anticipating the changes to the DSM, because now everyone's diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder anyway, so I think they did that because, the changes were about to happen, and also autism carries more weight in terms of like getting support and stuff and Asperger's, but I certainly I'm not 100% an Asperger. I kind of am and I'm not. I'm a bit of both. So I don't know if you get that. If any of you are kind of a little bit of both, maybe let me know. I'll be interested to know. But I certainly do think there are distinct types of autism. I'm not going to go into it now, but I think maybe they need to kind of create more nuanced types, again, the old divisions, because I think it's more. I think it's a lot more complex than just language development. Like you can be really great at language, but you can still be like pretty autistic. I don't think the two are separate, because in my understanding, autism is more to do with like your ability to socialise and integrate. You might have great language skills, but if you can't make relationships, then you are pretty disabled, you know. So I just think it's more complex in your ability to like talk like what I'm doing now. But let me know what you think. Anyhow, they've got rid of Asperger's now, so that's all kind of rather academic anyway. But I do think they should maybe think about making types, but just more, I don't know, scientific ones. I don't know. Future will tell what they do. But she does make a comment as well on a different note that about the fact she had to go privately, and also how not all can afford private assessment, she says. So yeah, it's not really equal, it's rather unfair. I was lucky in that I managed to get my diagnosis on the NHS. I was also lucky in that I didn't have to wait too long, and I was lucky in that it was quite straightforward. There was one psychiatrist who didn't seem to understand what I was trying to get referred for, but once I saw the right psychiatrist, it was a very straightforward process, and they referred me straight away to the autism team. I was lucky that the autism team had only just been set up, because if I had tried to go through the process a year ago, this was back in 2008, when I started the process. I started the process at the beginning of 2008, and at the end of that year, I got my first assessment appointment. And I was properly diagnosed at the beginning of 2009. So it was actually quite a straightforward process for me. But many people, it's not a straightforward process. I think it is very much a postcode lottery. And also my diagnosis was quite straightforward, because I didn't have any doubts that I was autistic. But I think also because like my parents were there with me, they could take a full developmental history, and I had enough information and enough evidence to give them. I might at some point maybe read through my diagnosis report. It's quite a short report. Some people seem to go on for ages. Mine's quite short. It's quite interesting how they vary from different people. But for those who aren't so fortunate in getting it on the NHS, it's possible to go privately, but not everyone can afford that. So that's an unequal thing, and they do need to sort that out, because it is a postcode lottery. Yeah, she talks about how, on page 29, how the primary school refused to acknowledge Talia's problems. They were happy for her to hit her academic targets, but because her behaviour was not extreme, she didn't get any help. In my case, the only reason school were interested was because I was not meeting my targets, because I struggled, really struggled with maths. I really struggled with comprehension, but in other areas, I was really advanced, so it was very kind of really uneven, and that's why the school were interested, because they were worried about me affecting their SATs results. If I was kind of an academic high flyer, which I wasn't at that age, maybe they wouldn't have done anything at all, because although they pointed out my social difficulties, they didn't really seem to care to do anything about them, which, you know, all they cared about was the fact that I was letting the school down on their league tables. But in Talia's case, she was hitting her academic targets, so she didn't get help. But her mum was in school on a regular basis trying to help them understand, and it was year 5 before things began to shift. Year 5 always seems to be a key year. It's quite weird that. Year 5 was when things began to shift for me. That was when the educational psychologist came in. That's when the teacher finally admitted that the school needed to help me, instead of constantly telling my parents to try and help me. And all these assessments were done with the aim of getting me into the right secondary school. But of course it didn't really help me beyond some very rudimentary learning support. That was more just about tick box exercises and really getting to the crux of the matter. But yeah, year 5 was when things began to shift for Talia as well. Talia says that she hated school. Talia hated school and she became depressed. In my case, I actually quite liked primary school. Particularly the last years of primary school, I really enjoyed primary school. I don't know, I really came to love primary school during the last few years. I loved the routine of it. I think the last few years of primary school, I think before that, it was just school, you just went. You know, I didn't like it, I didn't dislike it. But at the end of primary school, I really started enjoying it. I actually hated school weekends because I love school so much. Again, obviously, unfortunately, when I started secondary school, I began to hate school again. Which is a shame. That last year of primary school in particular was a golden year for me. It was the best year of my life, which I think I've talked about elsewhere. But yeah, Talia hated primary school and became depressed. Her mum became a parents leader, and she forced the school to implement changes. So school eventually began to help Talia with forming friendships, but only after Carrie fought. Carrie also had to fight for Talia to get an EHCP plan, which has replaced the statement, so that's Educational Health and Care Plan, because she was turned down the first time. But she said that having a statement makes no difference if a school has no commitment to special educational needs. Yet similar experiences in my case. I was at the highest end of the special education needs, don't know what you call it, assessment process. When they get the educational psychologist in, we're talking about pretty severe issues when it gets to that point. But the school hardly did anything of what that report said they should do. It was the minimum, absolute minimum. I think their track record on SEN was crap, and I've heard from others who've gone to that school, that I'm not going to name the school, but that it seems to have a pretty poor track record with special education needs anyway. They really just care about academics. Both schools I went to, in fact, seem to only really care about academics. Things might have changed now, let's hope they have, because this was back in the 90s, so things might have changed, but back then they just didn't seem to care. And I also like to say that obviously it helps if you do have a mum, particularly a celebrity mum like Carrie, who's willing to really fight for system, and not everyone's lucky, not everyone's fortunate to have that. She says that she's still struggling after the reforms and the educational health and care plans came in. She said that really not much has changed, and I've heard this as well from other sources, that really things haven't really changed at all. It's still pretty backward. She said that Talia loved secondary school to begin with, but then she became scared of detention and the fear of failing. And she started to refuse school. In my case, I was a lot more passive. Like I say, secondary school did me a lot of harm in terms of my self-confidence and my anxiety levels, but I never refused going to school. I was quite compliant in that respect. Talia became suicidal though, because she was very badly bullied. I think all autistics are bullied. I faced some low-level bullying. I think that's quite normal for autistics to face that. In my case though, I think I wasn't aware of it. I think in a way, not having that awareness kind of spared me, because it didn't really, at that age, it didn't really affect me. So, but Talia became very depressed because of it. Finally, her mum says good provision was put in place in year 11, but too little too late, as indeed is often the case. So I'm going to finish now, but I'm going to carry on reviewing this next week, so thank you for watching.